Howdy folks, welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, patch 8.2 preview, and there's big news. Chinese tanks ain't coming. No, Chinese tanks denied. Wargaming today announced that patch 8.2 would not see the release of the Chinese tanks. Instead, they're being pulled from, well, they're still available on the test server, but they've been pulled from the release of 8.2 due to statistical data gathered on the test server. They have decided to delay the release of the Chinese tanks until the next update. So Chinese tanks probably coming in patch 8.3. So what does that leave us with patch 8.2? Well, it wasn't just about the Chinese tanks. There are also new American tanks, the T-57 Heavy, the T-54E1, the T-69, the T-71, and the T-21. 2 light tanks, 2 medium tanks, and a new Tier 10 heavy tank. And they're still on schedule for release in patch 8.2, which is good because I've been playing them and I can show you some replays from some of those. Although not in this video. In this video I'm primarily talking about what the hell happened to the Chinese. Well, they weren't without problems. But, you know, that's what test servers are for. The medium tank's gun depression was just laughable, and in my opinion, it broke them. They were useless for anything other than shooting at other tanks at long range, and the guns weren't really suitable for that. That was dictated purely by the gun depression. Unless you wanted to be restricted at shooting at the turrets of other tanks when you were at close range, then they weren't good for anything else. But that's no reason to pull an entire nation's tank line. That's the sort of thing you can fix on the test server. I mean, if you look at previous patch notes on previous test servers, on the 8.1 test server with the Brits, on the 8 test server with physics, on the 7.5 test server, in each different build of the test server, the patch notes were full of things like increased the gun depression of the M48 pattern by 2 degrees, increased the turret armour at the front of this tank by 1 degree, reduced the top speed of this tank, but you know they're just numbers. They've changed stuff like that on test servers before going live. So whatever the reason was, it can't have been stuff like the crappy gun depression on the mediums. It can't have been stuff like the, in some people's opinion, overpowered penetration values of the gold ammo on the heavy tanks. What some people may consider the overpowered armour of the T110. You know, stuff like that is no reason to pull an entire national tank line from release. Those are things that they can fix, and that they do fix and have fixed on previous test servers. So it can't have been anything to do with the individual statistics and the numbers associated with the tanks. That just doesn't make sense. Another reason that, I mean, I've been having a look around the forums and having a look at the various crackpot conspiracy theories that are being spouted, because, you know, the internet's the internet. And one of the ones that seemed like it might have held a little bit of water was in regards to this thing, the new Chinese Tier 10 Heavy. And specifically was with regards to that tank compared to this tank, the T110E5. And we're basically talking about clan wars here. Now, the T110E5 is currently the general purpose clan wars tank. You see more of these in clan wars battles, in serious clan wars, than you do of any other tank, because it's just such a good all-rounder. It's fast, it's manoeuvrable, it's got a great rapid-firing gun, well, rapid-firing for a Tier 10 heavy tank. The armour's not bad at all, it's just good in almost every respect. And there were a lot of people on the forums saying that this thing, the Model 5A Tier 10 Chinese Heavy, was just too better. It was just too good compared to the T110E5 and was going to replace it in Clan Wars. Well, okay, let's just assume that that is a reason, and let's compare the two tanks. So there's the American, and there's the Chinese. The Chinese tank has more health, 2,400 versus 2,200. It's a lighter tank with a less powerful engine. But that basically just means that the power-to-weight ratios are the same. It's much faster, 50 kilometers per hour versus 37 kilometers per hour, and it is much more maneuverable, 36 degrees traverse versus 30 degrees. And 30 degrees is still pretty good for the T110, but it's significantly faster. So it's got more health, it's faster and more maneuverable. Now, the American tank has better hull armour from the front, but the Chinese tank has better turret armour from the front. And while the thickness of the American armour it's not quite double the thickness of the Chinese armour is very, very well sloped. And don't forget, we're talking about Clan Wars here. And in Clan Wars, everybody uses gold ammo. In serious Clan Wars, everybody uses gold ammo. And one point that I do try to consistently make about gold ammo is that it's not an I win button. Yes, it will defeat more armour thickness, but only if you're shooting at that armour at a correct angle. And with sloping like this thing looks very, very bouncy from the front. It also appears, and I can't confirm or deny this, but it appears to have spaced armour at the sides. So it may be that this thing has ended up being relatively better armoured than the T110E5. So that may also be a problem. Turret traverse, T110 has it beat, 32 degrees versus 26 degrees, and the view range and signal range is, to all intents and purposes, exactly the same. The Chinese tank has 5 meters more signal range, big deal. View range is exactly the same. Well, okay, that's the tanks themselves. What about the guns? Well, okay, T110E5 does have a very, very, very good gun. And the Model 5A has a choice of 2 guns. There's a 130mm gun, which is, to all intents and purposes, pretty much the same as the 130mm gun on the IS-7. It's in the same ballpark. But it's this one here, this 122mm gun, that has had people crying about overpowered Chinese tanks. So here are the 2 guns. There's the American, there's the Chinese. And the American still has the faster rate of fire, 6 rounds per minute, but not by much, 5.77 on the Chinese. And ignoring the standard ammunition, because we're talking about Clan Wars here, the penetration with gold ammo is 381 on the American. It's 400 on the Chinese. And it's more damage, 440 versus 400. The accuracy may as well be the same, 0.35 versus 0.36. The American gun does have significantly faster aiming time. And it's worth pointing out, however, that the ammunition for both of these guns is high explosive anti-tank. The gold ammo for both of these guns is heat ammo. It's the same on the Chinese, and it's the same on the American. And the thing about heat is that it doesn't lose penetration with distance, unlike APCR, which does. But heat doesn't get bonus normalization against sloped armor. APCR does, and standard AP does. High explosive anti-tank doesn't. So it keeps the same penetration regardless of the distance that the shot has to fly, but it doesn't get bonus penetration against sloped armour. So I suppose there is a case to be made that this tank is just likely to kick the T110E5 off the top of the Clan Wars tree, and that's a fair point to make. But there are 4 questions that don't appear to have been asked in relation to this. And those questions are, yeah, and so what? Seriously, who cares? So people are going to have to grind out a new nation's tank line to get the best tank for Clan Wars. Well, guess what? They've done that before. We call it the T110E5. And people don't have a problem doing that because they're all driving this thing in Clan Wars. So, again, that's no reason. Absolutely no reason. Even if it happens to be true, and I'm not 100% convinced it is, but even if it is, so what? Just because this tank is going to be better in Clan Wars is no reason to pull all the Chinese tanks from the patch update. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm left struggling to come up with a reason as to why they're doing this. Now, I don't for a second believe... Well, it's not necessarily true. Again, they have said that due to statistical data gathered from the test server, they're cancelling the Chinese tanks, and they're going to modify them, tweak them, do whatever to them, and they're going to push them out in the next update. Now, assuming that what they've said in their press release is true, it could be that the data that they've analysed on the test server basically consists of hundreds of thousands of players trying the Chinese mediums, laughing their asses off, and then never playing them again and having fun with the new American tanks instead. And that would be a significant problem. Significant enough that they might think, we really need to rethink our whole strategy here, and pulling the entire Chinese tank line until patch 8.3. That I could believe that idea, but they're never going to come out and say that because it'd be terrible press. Another thing that could have happened, and this is pure speculation, I have no evidence to back this up whatsoever, this is just my own crackpot conspiracy theory. The Chinese government is notoriously sensitive about how it is portrayed and perceived in the Western media. And this would not be, if this is the case, it wouldn't be the first time that the Chinese government have detected, whether it was intended or not, some kind of insult to their country in game software, and used that as a pretext to block or impede in some way by, I don't know, raising taxes or causing legal problems or just creating a fuss or whatever about a game's status, if you like. I mean, for example, World of Warcraft. Blizzard do not run World of Warcraft in China. They're not allowed to. Another company, a Chinese company, runs it in China for them. World of Warcraft, Blizzard had problems pushing the new expansion, Mists of Pandaria, in China, purely because of the way they represented the pandas. You know, just stupid stuff like this, which the Chinese are very, very sensitive about. And it may very well be that something like that has happened in World of Tanks with the Chinese line. Perhaps the Chinese government feels that not enough respect is being paid to their tanks, and they've raised a problem, whatever that may be. And that's not the sort of thing that Wargaming are ever going to push out in a press release, because it would kill their share price. The news that their expansion into the Chinese market was being blocked on "you've insulted us" grounds by the Chinese government, and that's not something they're ever going to announce in a press release. So bear in mind, this is total speculation on my behalf, and I have absolutely no grounds for saying this. It's just another one. It's just another reason you can float out there for why the Chinese tanks have been shit canned in patch 8.2. But I have to admit, I'm not sad that the Chinese tanks are not coming out in patch 8.2. And it's not that I don't have anything. It's not that I have anything against the Chinese tanks. I like the heavies. I thought the mediums were complete garbage. And I haven't played the light tanks yet. Well, I've played the teeny little tier 5 or tier 6. Where is it? Let's have a look. This little thing. There we go. Yeah, tier 6. I've played that. And it's all right. But that's the only Chinese light tank I've played. I was looking forward to trying the others. Not really going to bother now. But, well, it's not all doom and gloom. We still have the Americans, and I have been having fun with this thing, the T-57 Heavy. But the fact that they're removing the Chinese, as I said, I'm not shedding any tears over it, because we've just got the British tanks, for God's sake. The only British tank I have is the Crusader. I still haven't finished getting the American tanks that I want, and I personally feel that they're releasing too much new stuff too soon. We haven't even seen the British tank destroyers and artillery yet. And they're introducing the Chinese. Whoa, hold on there, Wargaming. Hold your horses. Can we just get one nation bedded in before we start throwing in a half-assed iteration of another new nation? So, yeah, I'm not going to shed any tears over the fact that the Chinese are not coming in patch 8.2, because I just think it's too much too soon. Your opinion, of course, may differ, and, that's fine. And feel free to have a discussion about why you think, in the comments below, why you think the Chinese tank line is not being introduced in 8.2, and whether or not you think it's a good idea. So that is my quick summary of the major news of the day. Chinese tanks no longer being introduced in patch 8.2. Coming up later tonight, we're going to have some T-57 heavy tank action for you. I've been quite enjoying this thing, and more of that later. Until then, as always, take care on the battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.